The morning sun was supposed to rise at 6:02 a.m., but as far as Philip Slater could tell, it never actually did. Shifting banks of fog masked the sky, layering the forest in an eerie half-light. He'd driven all the way to northern Maine the previous night, excited for a weekend of solitude in the wilderness. His plan: hike a remote trail recommended by a friend, camp for a couple of days, and reset his life away from the city's bustle. But daybreak brought none of the bright cheer he'd anticipated. Instead, a dank mist clung to the pines, swirling over the leaf-strewn ground. The endless fog muffled every sound, unsettlingly thick. Phil found himself peering through the haze, compass in hand, trying to recall the trail markers. His first mistake: he'd left his map in the car, trusting memory and phone GPS. His second: not checking the forecast. Now the low clouds refused to lift. Each breath tasted of moisture and pine, and the vast emptiness of the surrounding forest pressed in on him. "I can manage," he murmured, more to calm himself than anything else. "Fog's just water vapor. I'll wait it out." By mid-morning, the fog showed no sign of retreat. Phil's phone had no signal typical in these remote areas, and its battery was dipping precariously after hours of searching for a connection. He flicked it into airplane mode to conserve power. That's when he realized his compass needle was spinning with no sense of north. He tapped the glass face, shook it, tried again. The needle swung left, then right, then aimlessly spun a slow circle as though disoriented by some magnetic anomaly. A chill skittered up his spine. Without a functioning compass or phone GPS, his sense of direction was guesswork. The forest floor, blanketed with damp leaves and tangled roots, looked the same in every direction. Snap. The faint crack of a twig startled him. He froze, listening. Another snap, then a crunch in the leaves. Footsteps. Relief surged within him. Someone else was out here. "Hello?" he called, voice echoing in the thick air. "I'm lost." The footsteps paused, then continued, moving away at a steady pace. Phil chased after them, stumbling over exposed roots. He strained his eyes, glimpsing a flicker of movement in the haze. Perhaps a figure. But no matter how he hurried, the footsteps remained the same distance ahead, luring him deeper into the unknown. Time blurred. The sun, if it still existed, hid behind layers of cloud. Overhead, the canopy of firs and spruces formed ghostly silhouettes. The footsteps remained distant, a metronome of crunches that echoed in the silence. Panic nibbled at Phil's mind. He'd been walking in circles, or so it felt, for over an hour. Or was it 2? The ground sloped gently downward, then up again, and the surroundings all looked identical. Moss, lichen, occasional boulders. Fog that curled around tree trunks like a hungry creature. Abruptly, the footsteps stopped. Phil slowed his frantic pace, heart pounding. "Hey!" he shouted again. "Where are you?" No answer. Only the muted hush of swirling mist. He realized he was panting, near exhaustion. The dryness in his throat contrasted with the damp air. He fumbled for the water bottle in his pack, already half empty. The forest felt off. No chirping birds, no scurrying wildlife, just endless grey. He tried to recall what his friend had said about the region. Something about unexpected weather patterns, freak storms rolling in from the coast. "Calm down," he told himself. "You're just off trail. The footsteps must belong to another hiker who didn't hear you. Or maybe they're avoiding you." He forced a wry chuckle. "Don't be paranoid." Another hour passed, or maybe more. He'd lost track of time. The gloom seemed to intensify, as if midday had decided to return to night. Or perhaps the fog just thickened. Phil's stomach rumbled. He realized he hadn't eaten since dawn, just after leaving his tent. He rummaged for a granola bar, chewing it as he walked. The flavor was bland, somehow overshadowed by the moist forest air. Then, that odd hush. It pressed on his eardrums. He didn't even hear a breeze. Branches overhead were unnaturally still, as though the entire forest held its breath. His pulse quickened. He'd hiked in fog before, but never like this. This felt aware, as though the haze was alive, observing his every move. "Get a grip," he muttered. "You're just scaring yourself." Still, he felt the prickle of unseen eyes. He trudged forward, each step squelching in damp leaves, until a shape emerged in the distance. The silhouette of a small building wavered in the mist. At first, it might have been a trick of the eye, but it solidified into a cabin of rough-hewn logs. It stood silent beneath looming pines, a single window dimly reflecting the grey outside, relief spiked. People lived in cabins, right? Or at least used them as hunting lodges. Maybe he could get directions, a phone call, or shelter. He jogged closer, ignoring the chill gnawing at his bones. The footsteps he'd followed earlier were forgotten for a moment. The cabin had a single door, slightly ajar. No smoke rose from its chimney, but a faint glow lit the window from inside. Cautiously he knocked. "Hello? Is anyone here?" The door creaked under his knuckles. Pushing gently, he peered in. The interior was surprisingly well lit by an old-fashioned oil lamp. In the center stood a wooden table, set with a single plate and a polished metal fork. A chair faced the table, waiting. The smell that drifted into his nostrils was food, freshly cooked meat. His stomach growled. He realized then how hungry he was. Hours of hiking and stress had left him ravenous. He stepped inside, half expecting someone to greet him. "Hello?" he called again, voice trembling slightly. Silence. The cabin was small. Just one main room and a curtained-off corner that might be a sleeping area. A battered shelf held a few yellowed books. A cast-iron stove stood in the corner. On top of it rested a pot, steam gently drifting from beneath its lid. The aroma of cooked meat teased his senses, intensifying his hunger. He approached the table. The plate was empty, but next to it lay a carving knife, and the rich scent of seasoned broth or gravy wafted from the pot. It was bizarre. Who had prepared this meal? Why set just one place? Maybe they're outside, he reasoned, though the door had been ajar. Or perhaps they'd stepped out. Yet he heard no footsteps, no voices. His mind warred with his hunger. His instincts urged caution. This was too strange. But his gnawing appetite and the sense of disorientation from the fog made him weak. He lifted the pot's lid gingerly. Inside, chunks of meat in a simmering sauce. He didn't recognize the aroma precisely, gamey, maybe venison, or rabbit. He found a ladle and spooned some onto the plate. Steam rose, carrying mouth-watering spices. He hesitated. Is it safe? But the hunger was overwhelming now, primal. He dipped a finger, tasted it. Rich, savory. Warmth flooded his mouth. Before he knew it, he was devouring spoonfuls, savoring each bite. The door remained open behind him, the fog swirling. He half expected someone to barge in, demanding to know why he was stealing their food. But no one came. When his hunger eased, he realized the sun should have set by now. But outside, the fog still glowed with that dull grey light. Did the day ever progress? He glanced at his watch. It was stuck at 5:43 p.m. He tapped it. The second hand was motionless. A tremor coursed through him. His phone was nearly dead, but he checked it anyway. The clock read 5:43 p.m. as well, frozen. No signal, of course. Anxiety flared. He felt disoriented, as if time itself had stalled. Or had he blacked out? Impossible, he muttered. But the cabin's lamp cast the same unwavering glow. Outside, the fog hadn't darkened, nor had it lifted. The forest beyond the window was just a swirl of greys. A dull ache bloomed in his head. He needed to leave, to find the trail or a road. He stepped to the door and peered out. The thick mist seemed denser than ever, shifting slowly among the trees. "I can't see more than a few yards," he whispered. Something about returning to the forest felt repulsive. The memory of endless wandering, the fruitless chase after footsteps made him cringe. The cabin felt safe, stocked with warm food. Perhaps he could wait until the fog cleared. He closed the cabin door as though locking out the swirling grey. The interior was cozy enough, if bare. He checked the small sleeping area. A simple cot, worn blankets, No sign of personal belongings or a caretaker's stash. That gnawing sense of unease refused to leave him. "I'll just rest a bit," he told himself. "When the fog lifts, I'll see the road or call for help." Outside, a faint crunch of leaves. He tensed, but the sound faded. No knock at the door, no voice. The hush returned. If he was honest with himself, he felt exhausted physically and mentally. The meal and the unnatural quiet lulled him into a drowsy state. He sank onto the cot, intending only a brief rest. But the moment he closed his eyes, sleep overcame him like a weighted blanket. That night, if it was truly night, brought vivid dreams. He saw shapes in the mist, half-formed silhouettes moving among pines. They wore no faces, only blank contours. They circled him, whispering in a language made of rustling leaves. Then he was running through fog, stomach growling, searching for a cabin that kept shifting locations. He woke with a start, heart racing. The lamp still burned, unchanged. The pot on the stove still emitted faint steam. A wave of confusion washed over him. Had minutes passed or hours? Days? He checked his watch. Still 5:43 p.m. No movement. The phone's display remained the same. He felt ravenous again, as though he hadn't eaten in days. The pot on the stove beckoned with its meaty scent. He stood, muscles stiff, and approached. The pot was still full, the stew fresh and hot. How was that possible? The stove's fire still crackled faintly, though he didn't remember stoking it. "This can't be real," he whispered. But the hunger clawed at his belly, more insistent than reason. He ladled more stew into the plate, devouring it greedily. It tasted indescribably good, warm and rich, quelling the hollowness in his gut. As he finished, an unsettling realization struck. He had no memory of how long he'd been here. It could be a day or a week. The same half-light pervaded. The table was always set. The stew was always hot. The fog never changed. Philip steeled himself. This was insane. The food might be drugged, or he was trapped in some hallucination. He needed to force his way back into the forest, find his bearings. Grabbing his pack, he approached the door. But an unexpected wave of dread seized him as his hand neared the latch. Something in him shrank from going outside, as though the swirling haze was alive, waiting to swallow him. He took a deep breath, yanked the door open. A wall of cold grey confronted him, swirling in slow eddies. He stepped onto the threshold, eyes searching for a path. Nothing but shapeless silhouettes of trees. The swirling gloom pressed at him from all sides, thick and impenetrable. 1 step forward, 2. The fog curled around his ankles, obscuring the ground. A branch snapped underfoot, and he glimpsed movement to his left, a flicker in the corner of his vision. Another step. The hair on his arms stood on end. A low hiss, or was it just wind? Anxiety flared. Each breath felt labored, the wet air clinging to his lungs. Then, in the swirling haze, he glimpsed a face, a shape. A fleeting form that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Panic spiked, and he stumbled backward. He retreated into the cabin, slamming the door shut. Leaning against it, chest heaving, he realized he'd lost the nerve to wander aimlessly again. The forest felt malevolent. The cabin was at least stable, warm, and had food, even if it made no sense. He fell into a routine of uneasy existence. Sleep, eat, pace the cabin, check outside, retreat in terror. The lamp never dimmed, the stove never died, the stew never ran out. His watch and phone remained stuck at the same time. The sky never brightened nor darkened, a perpetual twilight of swirling fog. Occasionally, distant footsteps or rustling leaves indicated something moved beyond the cabin. He'd freeze, heart pounding, but no one ever knocked. He sometimes shouted for help, but the fog swallowed his voice. His hunger became a gnawing ache that returned alarmingly soon after each meal. He ate ravenously, despite the creeping horror that the stew had no known origin. Over time, the taste lost distinct flavor. It was just warm flesh in gravy, but he still devoured it. The strangest part, He couldn't remember any specific nights or days passing. He had fuzzy recollections of lying on the cot, drifting in and out of feverish dozes, always waking to the same lamp glow, the same half-light outside. Subtle shifts began in the cabin's interior. He noticed fresh logs stacked by the stove, though he'd never fetched them. The table occasionally had a spoon or knife he hadn't seen before. At times, a second chair appeared, then vanished. Each change was small, but enough to unsettle him. Is someone sneaking in while I sleep? He wondered. He started stacking furniture against the door before lying down, but always woke to find it moved aside. He never heard a sound, never saw a culprit. The stew remained constant, always enough to fill the pot. He tried pouring it out once in a panic, hoping it might force him to leave. But after an uneasy doze, he found the pot brimming again, steam curling from the surface. The table was set, plate wiped clean, fork shining. One pseudo-evening, that same distant crunch of leaves reached his ears. He jumped up, pressed his ear to the door. The footsteps circled the cabin unhurried. He inhaled, mustering courage, and flung the door open. The fog parted for a split second, revealing a tall figure standing perhaps 10 yards away. Phil's heart nearly stopped. The figure wore what looked like old hiking clothes, but their face was obscured by the swirling mist. They turned, took a step back into the haze. "Wait!" Phil shouted, rushing forward. He stumbled across the threshold, nearly toppling. But in the second it took him to regain balance, the figure vanished, leaving only the clammy emptiness. He called out again, voice echoing. No reply. His instincts told him to chase them, to finally break free. Yet the swirl of grey offered no direction, no path. The trees stood like silent sentinels, blocking any hope of orientation. The figure was gone, and fear once again drove him back inside. Each time he ate, he felt not just physical satisfaction, but an odd sense of belonging, as though the cabin wanted him there. The stew's effect on his mind grew stronger after a meal. He'd sink into a hazy stupor, memories blurring. He tried to recall his last name. Slater, yes, but it sounded foreign on his tongue. What about his family? Friends? Their faces swam in his mind but refused to focus. Even the memory of the city seemed like a half-remembered dream. He clung to scraps of identity. He liked black coffee. He used to play guitar. He worked in IT. Or was it finance? The fog inside his head rivaled the one outside. He suspected the cabin was draining him, feeding on his memories, tethering him here. But the rational part of him insisted he needed the stew to survive. Without it, he'd starve in this timeless limbo. One day, if day had any meaning, he mustered the resolve to search every corner of the cabin. He yanked open drawers, flipped through dusty books, pried up loose floorboards. Beneath the cot, he discovered a hidden compartment. Inside, a single tattered notebook. He flipped through the yellowed pages, scrawled with shaky handwriting. I found the cabin in the fog. I can't remember how long. The stew never ends. I'm so hungry all the time. Footsteps outside, but they never answer me. I tried to leave. The forest leads me back here. The stew tastes different each time, sometimes sweet, sometimes metallic. I dream of a presence that hovers near me. When I wake, the bowl is full again. The final entry read, "If you are reading this, then you too are trapped. Don't let it feed on you. Don't lose yourself." Phil's hands trembled. A wave of nausea coursed through him. This unknown writer had vanished, leaving behind a testament of entrapment. His heart pounded with renewed urgency. He had to attempt an escape, no matter the fear. He stuffed the notebook in his pocket, ignoring the stew's siren call. With a surge of determination, he left the cabin, forging into the fog with brisk steps. The forest enveloped him, silent and unchanging. He marched in a straight line, ignoring any illusions or footsteps. He resolved not to turn around. Even if he heard strange sounds, he'd keep going. Time lost meaning, but he trudged until his legs burned. The gloom swallowed all sense of direction, but eventually shapes appeared, a building's outline. Relief soared, until he realized it was the same cabin from a different angle. He let out a frustrated cry. He'd circled back, or the cabin had moved. Either way, it stood there, door slightly ajar, lamp glow seeping out. He collapsed to his knees, weeping at the futility. A growl of emptiness in his stomach cut through his despair. He realized he was starving again, despite refusing the stew earlier. The hunger felt sharper than any normal appetite, almost agonizing. The next period, whether hours or days, became a haze of hunger, fear, and half-conscious dreams. He tried rationing the cabin's stew, but each time the savage hunger overwhelmed him, forcing him to devour it. He woke once to find himself halfway outside, the door open, as though sleepwalking. The footprints he left in the damp leaves ended abruptly, swallowed by the swirling grey. Another time he found new sets of muddy footprints around the table, as though multiple people had dined. Yet no memory of others came to him. He grew paranoid, believing the cabin or the fog conjured illusions. The stew's taste changed, from savoury to sweet to acrid, but he ate it all. The gnawing emptiness demanded more. One moment the footsteps outside returned, louder than ever. The door swung open this time, forcibly. A figure stepped in, tall, face obscured by a hood. Phil recoiled, pressing against the wall. The figure approached, posture stiff. As the hood fell back, Phil glimpsed a half-rotted face, eyes empty, mouth parted. It spoke in a raspy voice. "You shouldn't have followed me." Realization hit him. These were the footsteps that lured him at the start. This thing. A ragged, decayed hiker, perhaps once a man. "Who are you?" Phil gasped, trembling. The figure gave a slow, inhuman grin, exposing blackened teeth. "Just like you. Hungry. I found this place, or it found me. I was the last occupant. Now you are." Phil's mind spun. The cabin. It needed a host. The figure pointed to the pot. "We feed. That's how it keeps us." "Keeps us for what?" "Lost souls," it whispered. "The fog is hungry. The cabin is a trap. We serve it or we starve." A wave of loathing overcame Phil. He staggered backward, refusing to believe it. The figure advanced, but then flickered as though dissolving. With a final rasp, it said, "Eat or be eaten," and vanished into the gloom, leaving the door wide open. Alone again, Philip sank to the floor, the cabin's lamplight casting flickering shadows. The stew's smell filled his nostrils, intensifying his hunger. He recognized the horrifying truth. It was no ordinary meal. It was a lure, ensuring he stayed, ensuring he never escaped. The notebook's words echoed, "Don't let it feed on you." But how to resist? If he didn't eat, he'd starve in this eternal twilight. With trembling hands, he picked up the pot, stared at its contents. In the swirling gravy, he thought he glimpsed lumps that looked suspiciously like human flesh. A wave of revulsion churned his stomach. He dropped the pot, stew splattering across the wooden floor. "No more," he croaked, tears burning his eyes. "I won't." Yet almost immediately, an agonizing emptiness gnawed at him, doubling him over. The hunger was beyond normal. It was a supernatural compulsion. Time twisted into a delirium of starvation, nightmares, and fleeting lucidity. He tried to dash out into the forest again, only to find himself back at the cabin, pot refilled, table set. The smell beckoned. Eventually, in a moment of weakness, he caved. He devoured the stew, weeping as he swallowed chunk after chunk. Each mouthful brought a grim satisfaction that drowned his moral revulsion. Days, weeks, or years might have passed. He lost track. His body weakened, or maybe it adapted. He forgot his last name entirely, forgot the city. The notebook's final pages blurred in his memory. The once lone place setting sometimes showed 2 plates, then one again, as though illusions of guests came and went. The footsteps outside occasionally resumed, but he no longer answered. The hunger had consumed him, forging a quiet acceptance of his fate. In a rare moment of clarity, he realized the cabin demanded a new occupant to break free. The decaying hiker had lured him in, transferring its curse. But no new soul had stumbled upon them, so he remained. The world beyond stayed locked in swirling grey. The cabin's door could open, but the forest only led in circles, returning him. The stew never ran out, nor did his hunger. The cycle repeated, an endless loop in time's dead zone. Sometimes he stood at the window, gazing at the featureless haze, remembering a life he'd once had. A job, a friend, maybe a woman he loved. The details slipped away the longer he stared into the swirling gloom. One day, or hour, or eon, a faint crunch of leaves pricked his ears. He peered out, noticing a new shape wandering in the distance. A lost hiker, perhaps. He felt the cabin's presence tighten around him, urging him to open the door, to let them see the lamps glow. He realized with dull horror, now he was the caretaker, the lure, the occupant. The cycle would continue if the newcomer ventured near. A twisted part of him felt relief. If someone else replaced him, maybe the cabin would release him. Another part of him felt pity for that poor soul. But pity couldn't quell his hunger. The fog in Maine remains thick, swirling between ancient pines. Hikers sometimes go missing, never to be found. Legends speak of a lonely cabin that appears in the Hazer place with a single occupant, a man who once was lost, now enslaved by an otherworldly hunger. In that cabin, a pot of stew simmers eternally. A table is set for one, or sometimes two, if the occupant imagines a guest. Outside, the hungry fog coils around the timber walls. No clock ticks, no sun rises or sets. The occupant barely recalls his name, only that he must eat to stave off a hunger that devours mind and soul. If you ever find yourself hiking alone in the dense Maine fog, and you catch a whiff of savory stew floating on the breeze turn back, resist the warm light you glimpse between the trees. For once you step inside that cabin, you may never leave, and the fog will keep you there, always hungry, always waiting for the next lost traveler.